My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with William Moriarty. It's July 23rd, 2025, and we're at Lingua Franca in Hopewell. William, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
First question to get things started is why wine?
For me, I always like to say that wine was sort of my confluence of a passion for hospitality and French. So I grew up in Boston, and I started waiting tables at 15. It was mostly out of the fact that I wanted some independence for my family, and there was a Friendly's about 3 blocks from my house, a little diner chain, and waited tables. And so I sort of waited tables all through high school, all through college. And around the same time, I started studying French. In my school, we had a program called World Languages. It was sort of a unique program. I don't know anyone else who's had something similar, but in 6th grade, we studied a different foreign language for like 3 weeks at a time. So we did like 3 weeks of Spanish, 3 weeks of French, 3 weeks of Italian. We did a few other things, like things that you wouldn't go on to study, but just to like expose you to different things, like 3 weeks of Latin, 3 weeks of sign language, 3 weeks of Braille. It was just like a very well-rounded language program. Massachusetts school systems, #1, still to this day. But at the end of that program, you decided what language you wanted to study the next year. And I remember struggling for a very long time. You had like a week to decide. And I was like, it's either French or it's Spanish. And I really liked French, but like Spanish is much more useful. And I know that like there's so many more Spanish speakers and, you know, where I live and around the world. And I struggled with it for a long time. And it was the night before I had to decide. And I took a hat and I took like 5 pieces of paper and wrote French and put them in the hat, and 5 pieces of paper and wrote Spanish and put them in the hat. And I pulled out a paper and it said Spanish, and I said, no, we're not doing that. Sorry, Spanish. I've since learned some Spanish, but primarily French. So I went on, studied French language and literature in college. I did a semester abroad in Paris. After college, I lived in Champaign. I taught English in Reims for a while as an assistant English professor in high school. And so for me, that the hospitality side of things and the French side of things, those sort of 2 passions met in French. And so they met in wine, pardon me. Yes, they met in wine. So after my time abroad, I came back to the U.S., I came back to Boston, and I started working for who I felt was the most predominant restaurateur at the time. She has since fallen from grace, so this is, for those who know, Barbara Lynch is, at the time, was the most prominent restaurateur at the time. She's since had a sort of fallout and is not seen as the brightest character on the Boston food scene these days for a number of reasons. She, among other things, hid tips from people. She threw me out of a moving car at one point. There's a whole thing there. There's, you know, Boston Globe articles and New York Times articles you can look up about her, and, you know, it is what it is. I think that she's a very, very talented chef who is, unfortunately, she has an addiction. She's an alcoholic, and it's something that hasn't been addressed, and she lost her restaurant empire because of it. But she's very talented, and she has led a lot of really bright and talented chefs and restaurant professionals into the world who've gone on to open their own restaurants and had really bright careers. So I went and I worked for Barbara Lynch, and I was with her for about 5 years at a number of her restaurants. She owned 7 restaurants in Boston. I started at Number 9 Park, which was her first restaurant. I then went to Monton, which was the only Relais and Chateau property in Boston at the time. I don't know if there is one at the moment, although Boston is now being rated for Michelin coming in the fall. Congrats, Boston. And then Sportello, a little bit more of a casual Italian restaurant, which is where I fell in love with Italian wine, because up until that point, for me, it was all about French wine. And I went to Sportello for a growth and management opportunity and said, but I'm never going to fall in love with Italian wine. You know, it's always going to be French wine for me. It's always going to be French wine for me. And lo and behold, I fell in love with Italian wine. And in that process, the wine director for the group, Kat Leary, who's a James Beard award-winning wine director, a really, really special person in the world, a great mentor for me. She took notice of me and took me under her wing. And in that process, she invited me to join her team. She had a very small team of about 3 who ran all of the wine programs for all 7 restaurants. And so we all kind of moved between all of the restaurants, doing all the buying, doing all the event planning, doing all of the staff education was a really, really large component of this restaurant program long before that was more commonplace. It's a little more commonplace today for restaurants to do that. It wasn't, and Kat had been doing that since the late 90s. Kat was one of the only female sommeliers in Boston in the 90s, and she was completely self-taught. She never got any certifications. This is not necessarily my opinion, and it might not be her opinion now, but at her time, in her time, she felt that the Court of Master Sommeliers was very much like a boys' club, and she didn't feel like it was her place to be part of it, and so she learned on her own, and gained a lot of experience and wealth and knowledge in that time, and she wanted to share it with her teams. And so education became a huge component of what we did. And so becoming part of Team Wine, as we very rudimentary called it, was a huge stepping stone in my career, a huge part of my life. I worked with Kat for about 2 years. It increased my wine knowledge in a huge way because I needed to be the smartest person in the room, or at least be able to function as one of the smartest wine people in the room. I needed to be able to go up against, not against, but go up to sommeliers who had been working in the restaurant scene for decades, and when they ask questions about Grand Cru Burgundy that I don't know the answer to, be able to give enough of an answer and come back with the rest of the answer later in a way that was satisfying to them. And so I would far overstudy in my free time in order to get there. I spent far too much time on the education component of things than on the actual buying and functional component of maintaining a wine list. But it was to that point, it was the most fun job I had ever had. I really, really enjoyed that job. It did come to a point, though, where it became clear that there was no growth. Kat had been with the company for 20 years. She founded that job. She created that. And there was no moving above that person, obviously. And so, for all the love in the world that I have for that person and everything that she had given me and taught me, I couldn't just be her number 2 for the rest of my life. Telling her that was one of the harder things that I've done in my life. But I had an opportunity to go and open a restaurant as the proper wine director myself. And so I joined the Lyons Group and under Patrick Lyons opened Rochambeau on Boylston Street. It was a very different restaurant group, not nearly as wine education focused. And so I was the person who was bringing in all of that. And that was fine. It was a very large project, beautiful space, lots of fun, French bistro, 4 different spaces, all built together. Opened in October of 2019, which is a super inopportune time to be opening a restaurant. We had 6 really banging months, and then the whole world came crashing down. And I got laid off and brought back on and off and on and off and on. And even when I was working, I wasn't doing the things that I loved about wine anymore. I wasn't talking to guests about pairing and helping them select bottles. I was fighting with people about masks, and I was serving martinis in snow boots because it was January in Boston and people still wanted to sit outside. And, you know, it wasn't fun for me anymore. I wasn't doing the things that I wanted to be doing. And so I made the decision to go closer to the source in wine, to be able to use my skills in wine in a way that were not related to restaurants. I said restaurants are going to need a minute to recover, which they did. And so in summer of 21, I made the decision to move to Willamette. I chose Willamette for a number of reasons. One, because I think that the wines are some of the best in the U.S. by far. I've always thought that. In fact, at Rochambeau, I poured Adelsheim Pinot Noir by the glass. People used to, every once in a while, will get mad at me that I didn't pour a French Pinot Noir by the glass. And I would always make the argument that we're making just as beautiful Pinot Noir here. And often people would try it and end up agreeing. 2020, Alison was supposed to send me to Pinot Camp. Still never been to Pinot Camp. Worked Pinot Camp now, but not been. What are you going to do? Love the wines. Loved. I had never been here before. One of the cool opportunities that I think that the Willamette Valley offers that no other wine region in the U.S. does is the proximity to a city. I live in Portland and I work in this beautiful countryside, and it's about an hour drive. I'm not in and out every day now, but there was a time that I was, and when I need to be, I can be here in an hour. You can't really live in San Francisco and work in Napa. There's people that do, but that's rough. You can't live in Seattle and work in Columbia. You can't work in the Finger Lakes and live in New York City. Like, there's just not really that opportunity to live in a great American city and work in a great American wine region, except here. So the combination of that convenience, me being a city kid, and loving the wines and wanting that duality of a city and country life, Willamette was the decision for me, even having never been here. I rented an apartment sight unseen. I got on a plane with a backpack and, my 2 rebs. I had a rabbit under each arm, and showed up at an apartment and rang the doorbell. And it took 5 minutes for the landlady to come down because she lived on the 6th floor. She was a little old lady. And for 3 of those minutes, I thought I was homeless. I said I moved to Portland and now I'm homeless. I've become a stereotype. But what are you going to do? But I wasn't. It was fine. And it was a cute apartment, and I stayed there for 2 years, and it was lovely. I started at Domaine Serene. I was at Domaine Serene for about a year. I had put out my resume to a bunch of places. I said, I'm going no matter what. I'm going whether I have a job or not, which in hindsight is dumb. But that's what I did. It's this pandemic. We all did things that were a little crazy. In that thought process, not the craziest thing that I could have done, right? But said I'm moving no matter what. But it'd be nice if I had a job. So I threw out my resume in all sorts of places that I could. And I got a call from this guy, Jonathan Adkisson. And he calls me and he goes, hey, so I just started at Domaine Serene. I actually just moved here from New York City. I've been with them for about 3 weeks, but I'm reopening their Lake Oswego location. And I know you worked for Barbara Lynch, so I know you can do just about anything. I know you've been through the fire. I know what you're capable of. And I need some East Coast management kick-ass attitude. How soon can you be here? And so Jonathan gave me my first job at Domain Serene. About a month into me being at Domain Serene, we're like getting systems together. It's a relatively newly opened location, newly reopened. I think they had opened it and then closed it down during the pandemic, so they were reopening it. And so it was like starting new. It was felt like an opening in a lot of ways. So creating new systems, mostly new staff, new ways of working. And we were getting everything together and kind of getting everything under a lock. And about 4 weeks in, Jonathan says, "Hey, let's take a walk." I said, "Okay, let's take a walk." That phrase is never great. So we're taking a walk and he goes, "Listen, I got to tell you, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. I got a job at Lingua Franca." And I said, "You got a job at Lingua Franca? So not only are you leaving me just as we're getting in rhythm, but you're also taking a job at the winery that I wanted to work at." When I moved here, I said the top 2 wineries I want to work at, Domain Serene and Lingua Franca. I had sent my resume to Lingua Franca and they didn't reply. How rude. What are you going to do? So Jonathan went off. I stayed at Domain Serene for the better part of a year. But I said, if anything opens up at Lingua Franca, keep me in mind. And for about 6 months, he kept being like, "I think we got something for you, but, just relax for a minute, relax for a minute. I was like, "Okay, I don't know what you're playing at. I don't know what this is about, but that's fine." Lingua Franca was going through the Constellation acquisition at the time. And when you go through a big acquisition like that, they don't hire anyone. It's hiring freeze while they're making all sorts of transitions. And that's what that was about. He had a spot for me, but they couldn't hire anyone until after the acquisition was finished. And so once the acquisition was finished, and he had me meeting with Larry, meeting with Thomas. I met Thomas at a basketball game. I knew the crew. And so once sort of the floodgates opened, it was time for me to leave Domain Serene anyway. It was, I just didn't jive with their systems as much. They have a lot of structure in place and a lot of management and overhead, and I like a little bit more independence to be able to run my own crew. And with a smaller crew like this, that just works a little bit better with what I do. So I left Domain Serene, came on with Lingua Franca, and it's been about 3 years now. Started off as the wine club manager. About a year ago, I took on brand, wholesale, and marketing. I like to just say I do a little bit of everything here. It's a really small team. The things that we do with the few people we have here is frankly absurd. And so there is a lot of hands in a little bit of everything. And so I say I do a little bit of everything, but I think everyone does a little bit of everything here. We might be owned by Constellation, which is a large, international company, but in a lot of ways we function as a small independent winery still. And it's why when Larry was searching for outside investment after losing 90% of our fruit in 2020, he chose Constellation because they gave us our independence to make wine the way we wanted to make wine. They kept on our team, and they didn't force us to increase production on the estate.
It's a good story. I have lots of questions.
Yeah.
Let's back up a little bit.
Wherever you like.
Let's start with school, actually. So you talked about French being chosen eventually by you, and having a passion for French language. So tell me about going into college, choosing a school, and what you thought your path ahead might look like.
Sure. I mean, I gave the most lack of thought to my university because I said you could probably study French absolutely anywhere. So I said I want to get away from my family to assert some independence, but if I get too far away, my mom's going to call me crying every weekend. Which, when I told her I was moving to Oregon, she threw herself on the floor crying, and I was 33 at the time. It was too much. Love you, Mom. It was a little much. So I went to New York. I went to Long Island. I went to Hofstra University. Studied French at Hofstra. It was cool though. What I found really fun there is the opportunity to, my minor is in LGBT studies, and the head of the French department also ran the LGBT studies department. And so there was a lot of opportunity to sort of mix the two. So I could read, there were a lot of classes where I would read queer French literature in French and get partial credit for LGBT studies and partial credit for French, whereas there would be people in class that were just doing French and there would be people in the class just doing LGBT studies. It was an interesting program that I don't think a lot of universities have. That said, that is the same professor who shamed my accent out of me. He asked me, he was my advisor, and he asked me what I wanted to do with my degree. And I said, I want to teach English in a French-speaking country. And he burst out laughing and said, no one's going to ever pay you to teach English with that shitty Boston accent. And so I, from that point on, made a concerted effort to pronounce my R's and make a few distinct non-Bostonian sounds in my speech pattern. And then I did teach English. Take that, Dr. Powell. It was a lot of people come to me now. The accent comes out from time to time, but some people are like, well, I wouldn't have known you were from Boston. Whereas I come from a long line of East Boston townies that sound real hard. It's a distinction that I put on myself out of shame.
Very, very impressive to overcome, I suppose.
Yeah. It's just, everyone has hardships, right? Mine's consonants.
So you mentioned studying abroad in school and then heading back to France after graduation. So tell me about first experience in France and deciding that was where you wanted to go back and work after school.
Sure, yeah. So my study abroad in France was at Université de Paris 5, which doesn't exist anymore. It was consolidated into another within the University of Paris system. And I lived with a host family that I put in quotes because it wasn't so much a family as much as it was a single mom whose son had moved out and she just had a spare bedroom and she didn't want to live alone, and so the family was one person. She was lovely though. Madame Renat was an absolute sweetheart. She had just retired. In fact, the day I arrived in France was her retirement party, and so she paid to put me up in a hotel for the night because she was I'm not gonna be home until late. So let's meet tomorrow. You stay in a hotel overnight, and I was great, sure. very, very sweet woman. And we lived in the 16th, which, if you know anything about Paris, is bougie, 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 bougie. It's like the Upper East Side, very like fancy old money, where like the aristocracy lived, kind of that side of Paris. We lived on Square Mozart's Square. But she would cook for me usually twice a week, I think it was, because she loved doing family dinners, and it was always these like very French, like 4, 5, 6 course meals for 2 people, which sounds insane. Like, I don't even know how I would portion meals in such a way, but she would do it. And it was how I tried a lot of foods for the first time. It's how I tried blood sausage for the first time. It's how I tried rabbit for the first time, which I don't eat anymore because of the pet rabbits, but you know, you try things. It's how I tried, I'm trying to remember what else, frog's legs for the first time. Sometimes she would like put something in front of me and I'd say, oh, what is it? And she would say, eat it first and then I'll tell you, which was fine. You know, I was down for whatever. But she'd always have wine with dinner, and it was always French wine. And I remember one night asking her, I said, Madame, we always have wine with dinner, but it's always French. Do you never drink Italian wine or American wine or, you know, Latin American wine or Spanish wine? And she like sort of sat up and looked me dead in the eyes and went, Pourquoi? Why would I do that? And she went on to say, we have the best wine in the world right here in our backyard. Why would I drink anyone else's wine? It was the most French thing she could have said. But it's very telling of the mentality. But you know what? The French got to do what the French got to do. They're not 100% wrong. Solid wine portfolio in the country of France. I'll give them that. But you know, you want a little variety sometimes.
So tell me about going back then after school.
So going back was an opportunity to teach. So there's a program called TAPIF. It is an acronym, and I will not get to what it stands for. Apologies. But it is a teaching program where they take in students from or postgrads from around the world to teach their native language in France, and it's designed to be a short-term program. Mostly, by the way, it's paid. I think it was paid €1,000 a month. Then minus French taxes, it was really like €600 a month, which is not really enough to live on. But you can probably do it for a year. I've seen people do it for 2. I don't think anyone does it more than that. But you apply for it, and if you get in, you pick an academy, which is like it's the equivalent of a school district, but it's closer to the size of like a state rather than like so you pick like a state you want to be in France, so to speak, and you rank like your top 3, and then they place you where you're most needed. I was placed in Champagne-Ardenne, so just northeast of Paris, and the big city there is Reims, which is sort of the like main city of the Champagne region. And I was very lucky that I was in Reims proper. I had a lot of colleagues who were placed in like deep in the Ardennes forest, and like they were like, I didn't have a neighbor for miles, like it just middle of nowhere. Whereas I rented an apartment that was across the street from the Clicquot estates. It was, you know, very cute. Every day I walked by the Cathedral of Kings, where every king from Clovis to Napoleon was coronated. Lovely. What else could you ask for? And I loved it. You're never anyone's primary teacher. You're always like a secondary teacher. So like I didn't teach anyone like verb tenses in English. I was responsible for a lot more like English culture, English like conversation and phrasing and things like that. I used to do a lot of like goofy fun exercises. Like I would put on like music videos and I would give the kids the lyrics with certain words like whited out, and they had to listen and fill in the words. When the Super Bowl came around, they were like, you have to teach a lesson on the Super Bowl. You're the American. And I was like, okay, but I don't know anything about sports. I don't know nothing. And they were like, no, but you know more than we. And I was like, I don't know. It's close. And they were like, you got to put something together. So I taught them about Super Bowl commercials. I pulled up all the commercials from the year before, and we watched the commercials. We'd watch a commercial, and then we'd like discuss it before. Like, okay, what's the relevance? Why did they use this song? Why did they talk about this? And it's all about facilitating discussion with the kids. And I was fortunate. So in France, high school is the last 3 years, not the last 4. So it's more of a little bit of an older segment. And you don't have to, but you can start to specialize in high school in France. And my high school did have a specialty in, I think it was English and design, or architecture and design. And so I had the benefit of having a lot of students who had a really strong level of English that we could like hold pretty decent conversations. Like we read Edgar Allan Poe during like Halloween time, and like, you know, which you like, whatever the French equivalent of Edgar Allan Poe is, I would not have been able to do my junior year in high school. You know what I'm saying? So it was a really cool, fun opportunity. And then on the weekends, I would spend my time in champagne caves, because that's what you do.
So tell me about your relationship with wine at this point, and before you come back to the United States. Was wine something that was more than a passing interest for you?
Wine was fun, and I was developing an interest, and I think it was still, it wasn't like demystified for me yet. It was something I was interested in. Like, I think there's a couple things that really help demystify wine, and I think that language is one of them. I think geography is one of them. But like having French under my belt, I think I can look at a lot of wine terms and understand things quicker, in a way that people who don't speak French or like struggle with, or don't make those connections as quickly. And so that sort of helps. But at this point, I'm enjoying wine. I'm learning more about wine. I'm still drinking a lot of cheap wine, but cheap wine in France is better than cheap wine here. There's still, you know, it's still cheap, but it's a little bit better. I don't think I'm taking it super, super serious at this point, where I'm like studying regions or like learning traditional cepages, and like I'm not quite there yet.
So then, coming back to the United States after your experience there, tell me about you mentioned kind of sort of jumping into the highest end of fine dining there. Did you have a plan in place? Did you have something you wanted to achieve? Did you have sort of a career path in mind when you started working there?
I think I just wanted to be part of the best. I think that I knew what I was capable of, even if that sounds egotistical. Sorry. But I knew that I had that capacity, and I knew that this was the team that would get me to the apex of what I was capable of. And that's still true today. That is true. That is what happened. It was a little more trial by fiery than I thought it was going to be, but you live and you learn. Working for that company was difficult in a lot of ways. And I think anyone that worked there will tell you the same thing. I don't regret it because I think that even in hard times you learn an enormous amount. But it was tricky. It was hard working with chefs with enormous egos. It was hard working with people with drug and alcohol problems. It was, as one might expect. But there were also, for the handful of bad actors or rough seeds or whatever the expression is, there are dozens of people that I'm still very close friends with from that company that went on to be great chefs, great somms, great hospitality professionals that went through similar, trial by fire.
So take me through some of those years there, the roles you had, and sort of growing into the wine part of things. Tell me about sort of some of the places you worked and some of the kind of the big moments for you, or the big tasks for you.
Yeah. So at number 9 in Monton, because they're so highly regarded and high end, everyone who works there has to start at the absolute bottom. I think I saw like one exception the entire time I was there. And so I started off as a host at number 9, despite having years of restaurant server experience. And a host at Monton, and then quickly became a kitchen server, which is essentially a food runner. I was only in each of those positions for about 6 months. And I think that my sort of like experience stuck out, so to speak. And I was asked to come on to the team at Sportello. The Monton and the interesting thing about Monton, Barbara had 3 restaurants in the same building, in the same, like, it's one complex, it's all connected, you can run a circle through. So, like, Monton is the fine dining Relais and Chateau super luxe property here. And then through this door is Sportello, which is a super casual, like countertop only Italian pasta joint. And then down the stairs from that is an underground bar called Drink, which has been named best bar in the world on multiple occasions. And then underneath Monton is a prep kitchen that all 3 spaces share. And so you can just run loops around it, which the Monton chefs did pre-service sometimes as like a, get the energy, get the blood flowing kind of thing, which is very annoying if you're like trying to run around with it. We're trying to like move product through, but whatever. And so the Sportello manager knew me and asked me to join his team. He said, "You don't need to be over there anymore. You don't need to, spend 3 years working up those ranks. We need someone over here." So he brought me on as his service manager. And so I was service manager at Sportello for about, I don't even know anymore. Maybe I was there 2 years? Probably 2 years. As, I think, partly service manager for a year, and then assistant general manager for a year, something like that. And then at that point, brought into Team Wine with Kat for 2 years, 5 years total with the company.
How did you get noticed to be on Team Wine?
One member of Team Wine went on maternity leave, and so we had let me back up. We had a weekly wine words meeting. So we had a 1 hour a week wine training. all of the more casual spots had wine words for 1 hour every week. The more high-end restaurants had usually 30 minutes during pre-shift, 3 to 4 times a week. And I guess it was very active in wine words, asking lots of questions, answering lots of questions, being very involved, I was that kid in school. I guess, in some subjects, French and wine. We had a member of Team Wine go on maternity leave, and Kat approached me and said, while Melanie is on mat leave, would you lead wine words in her absence? You know, and I'll help you, I'll give you resources, but I can't be there every single time. Like, we're spread a little bit too thin. She's going to be gone for, however many weeks, or, can you help us out? And I said, absolutely. Melanie never came back. And so I did that for about 6 months. And then Kat was like, okay, I think it's time we make this a permanent thing. So she took me out to dinner. It was a very cute, very formal thing. She took me out to dinner to Bernadeado, which was it still is a really beautiful Spanish tapas restaurant in Brookline, which has won multiple awards for like best sherry program in America. Beautiful spot. And over some manzanilla, she was like, I'd really like you to join Team Wine permanently. I cried. I cry a lot. I've cried at commercials. I'm a crier. What are you gonna do?
So I'm curious about, from your kind of own personal wine education, you mentioned how heavily you leaned into educating stuff in wine. So tell me about that process for you leading up to that point. How much had you learned on your own independently? What did you find was the sort of the method for your own wine education? And what did you find interesting enough about wine to keep digging deeper?
At that point, I had learned mostly on my own with Kat's support and the resources that she had given me. I mean, this is around 2016, 2017, and she had been keeping like a Google Drive. I mean, it had been Google Drive the whole time. I'm sure it was once on like a physical hard drive, but like had been keeping resources on a drive for wine words since 1999. And so they were a mess, and they weren't organized in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think she would mind me telling people this. Love you, Kat. But it is like, it was, there's so much information in there, and so many things that were like remade and reworked and redone, and there was always something new, and there's always a new vintage, and there's always a new producer, and there's always a new generation, and there was always something new to learn. I never ran out of things to find out about. In my time at with the company, one of my favorite entities in the company to work with was called the Butcher Shop. And so it was fully a full-service butcher shop, but also a wine bar. Don't ask me why that works together, but it does. We had like a rotating selection of by the glass. So there was like a white of the day, a red of the day, a rosé of the day, and these were constantly rotating selections. And so I constantly had to be trying new things and changing that out, and like exploring new things. Reps loved me just constantly needing samples. Be nice to your reps, kids. They work hard for you. But I introduced that staff to Greek wine, Portuguese wine, and Georgian wine in the span of about 6 or 9 months. And that was the same year that we were nominated for a James Beard Award. And so for best beverage program or best wine program or something. And so it was 2019. And the Butcher Shop had been nominated before, but it hadn't been for, I really want to say like 10 years. Maybe not quite 10 years, but a good stretch of time. And I really think it was the ability to like infuse some regions, some countries that are like a little bit less traditional. They're still European countries. But like they're not French, Italian, American. They're not Spanish. They're not your first thoughts. And Portuguese takes some learning. Greek takes some learning. Georgian takes some learning. They're great varietals that you're not familiar with. They're languages you're less familiar with. And so I think that was exciting for me, and I think it had that payoff. That was, quite rewarding.
So once joining the wine team, tell me about your time working with Kat and about your own sort of the blossoming of your own wine education and wine knowledge.
I think that it's interesting to be able to pick your own direction where you want to learn next. Well, let me say this. I don't think I had that full range. I think that things needed to be tethered to the program because the culinary program was still primarily French and Italian. We had an oyster bar. We had, a lot of American influence. So I think that like we had to tether to some classics, and there was some precedence for being able to do some things that were a little off the board. But I think if I had shown up with like, this is Western Chinese wine, like that would have been a little like, I don't know if this works with the program. Actually, now that I'm saying that, I think we did use that for a special event once, but it was a one-off. I'm sure there was a reason that we did that. I'm not going to think of it now though. It's fine. I think that there were some like directional constraints, right? I think within that, there's still so much to learn.
You mentioned like kind of a slow entry into working with the wine group. Tell me about the time when you're working directly with Kat and those couple of years, and sort of I guess what you learned from her and what you were doing, what the work was like.
Kat's a creative. Kat's a super creative. She's very big picture. Kat is like would show up to work in a caftan and just like silk scarves and very like woo, like she's very like ethereal and sort of all over the place, and it's a very lovely energy. And then we had another member of the team, Joey, who's very like spreadsheets and analytical and like, well, inventory is this and blah, 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 blah. And they were two complete polar opposites. And so I had the fun task of being the intermediary, where I got to be like half whimsical and ridiculous and half analytical and thoughtful, which is a super fun place to be, right? Why, like get some things done and then just be a goofball is amazing. Because, you can be fun and lively and excitable in front of the staff and then go back and really analyze where, like, okay, we only have 6 bottles of this, and so this needs to go to this location and be used for that event, and like, you need both. And teaching me to be both, I think, benefited my career in a huge way.
So you mentioned earlier kind of hit a ceiling there and time to move on. So tell me about making the next step and how you sort of chose what to do next.
Oh, it was gut-wrenching. It was terrible. I do not recommend. It was when you tell yourself for so long that you're going to the top, and then you get to the top, where do you go next? Like what, I was like, do I have to move? Do I have to go to it? Like, I was like, maybe I need to go to New York or Chicago or San Francisco. Thought about it. I didn't know, but I also wanted to strike out on my own a little bit before that. And so I was like, I need to find a project here to make my own before I try and go somewhere else. And so Rochambeau was interesting to me because it was French, it was massive, it was brand new, and I had full autonomy of it. And so I got to write a wine list completely from scratch, which no one gets to do. No one gets to do. Everyone is always stuck with whatever their predecessor bought and has to figure out how to place that somewhere, get rid of it, sell it, do something with it. You're always stuck with whatever was given to you before. I got to build the list exactly how I wanted it to look, save for a few like upper management people being like, "I want you to buy from co-brands and we're friends with them," and like, that's okay. I can find a gem in any portfolio. It's fine. It was just yeah, writing a wine list from scratch was one of the coolest things I've ever done. How many times have I said that in this? Is it like 12? Are we up to like 12, 13? Someone have a clicker?
You've done some cool stuff.
I don't know, yeah.
Ashamed of that?
Maybe I'm just like, dramatic.
Tell me about building a wine list from scratch.
It was cool. It's harder work than it sounds like. I remember all of my colleagues just giving me, side eye because like reps would just show up with samples constantly. And they're like, William just sits around and drinks wine all day. And it's like, yeah, but it's more than that. Like, it's not, I'm not just like, getting sauced all day. Like, it's thoughtful and analytical. And like, I need to be thinking about all of these and making, I've kept all of my notes. I still look back at them sometimes and I'm like, oh, geez. I once had a rep show up with 30 bottles. And I was like, who do you think I am? And from that point on, I was like, no one's allowed to show up with more than 10. No more than 10 samples. Even that's kind of a lot, but like if you absolutely have to show me X, Y, and Z, no more than 10. If it needs to be more than 10, make 2 appointments. You gotta come twice. Figure it out. But it's like a puzzle. It's like, what do you want the wine list to look like? How do you want to build it out? Like even the formatting of it, like, is it one page? Is it multiple pages? Is it horizontal? Is it vertical? Is it built by region? Is it built by style? Is it like, what does it look like? How's your guest going to read it? It was an absolute puzzle. It took a long time to get where I wanted it to be. It's the kind of thing that you always look back at and be like, I should have done that. But I don't know. The final iteration that went out, I was happy with. It was built by region. So half of it was white, half of it was red. It was all one page, horizontal. And it was roughly built by regional style. So starting with your lighter regions, moving into your heavier regions. So your reds were, started with your Beaujolais into Burgundies, into your Rhones, up to your Bordeauxs. It's not a perfect system, but I think it's for people that need a bit of a guide, I think it's helpful. Because people that want to ask Psalms so often don't want to ask Psalms for advice, which is a shame because it's what they're there for, 100%. And they want to help you a lot. Probably too much, which is maybe why people don't want to ask. But it's people don't want to ask. They're nervous. People want to look like they already know the answer, whether it's to look good in front of a date or, just like, general perception. So if we as the people who write lists can create some indicators to help people make decisions, I think it makes all the difference.
So you talked about obviously opening in at the end of 2019 and having being the victim of poor timing. Tell me about the first few months before the pandemic, what the work was like, what you kind of saw going ahead, and then tell me about the pandemic.
Oh, it was the first 6 months, it was bonkers. The opening was bonkers. It was... people tell you that restaurant openings are crazy. They're crazy. I lost 30 pounds, fist fought my GM in an alley at 4 a.m. That's how we say hello in Boston, though. That's fine. It's fine. We're great friends now.
So you can lose the accent, but not necessarily all of the...
Listen, I love Oregon. I will always be a Bostonian in Oregon. I don't think it will ever go away. And never has anyone been like, oh, so you're from here, right? Like you grew up here? Never happened. Don't think it ever will. And that's fine. Still carry an umbrella, Sorry, guys. It was wild. It opened and flooded. The doors flooded immediately. Like we were booking parties, and it was huge, huge. It felt like Vegas, like in the weirdest way possible. Because Boston and Vegas are not akin. But yeah, it was wild. Lots of late nights. Go, 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 go. Constantly opening large formats, Magnums 3 liters, and, cocktails flying off the bar. Just everywhere you could put a table, there was a table. I was doing themed dinners. I was doing wine dinners. I did a Burgundy dinner. I did an Alpine dinner. I don't even remember, but different sort of wine themed dinners that would sell out immediately. They were small, they were intimate, 15, 20 people, but they would sell out instantly. It felt like being famous for a short amount of time. And then January hit and things slowed down a little bit, and you expect things to slow down a little bit in January, especially in a city like Boston where you start to see more snow. And February got even slower, and we start to hear about this virus thing and da-da-da-da-da. And I got an offer from Wilson Daniels to fly out to Napa to do a blending and winemaking seminar for 2-3 days. And I was like, well, it's slow. You guys don't need me. So I'm going to take the opportunity. So I went. And I remember getting on the plane and seeing a couple people with wet wipes, wiping down their seats and being like, oh my God, so performative. Calm down, right? Get to first time in California, go up to Napa, and we're not sequestered, but we're busy. They packed our day for, I forget if it was 2-3 days, something like that. And so I'm not paying attention to the news very much, but after we get out of that, it's a different world. Everything has changed. It's all you hear on the news, all people are talking about. And I had built in a couple days of staying in San Francisco because I had never been. There was a boat that was stuck in San Francisco Bay at the time where there was an outbreak, and they didn't know what to do with them. Could see the boat from my hotel. I just remember looking out and being like, oh, sorry. I don't know what to do. I do, but like things weren't shutting down yet. People were just like not going out as much, and so I tell people like I had the least San Francisco experience of all time in that I never got caught in traffic. I didn't have to make reservations anywhere. I never waited in line for anything. I just did whatever I wanted. Went everywhere. Just walked right into Atelier Cren, sat right down. It was great. You know, had a couple days. Wasn't sure that they were going to fly me home. It was a mix of things. Like, one of my reps back home, her brother lives in San Francisco and is a nurse by day and drag queen by night. Very San Francisco. And like a nurse-themed drag queen. I wish I could remember her name. Shout out. My rep was like, oh yeah, you have to go see her. Go to this bar. And she's in like a 1930s like long nurse's coat and like throwing toilet paper at people because toilet paper was in low supply, being like, we're not gonna let Miss Corona shut us down. 2 days later, Miss Corona fully shut us down. Just got home though. Just barely. I got home, I think I went to work one day, and then they were like, Boston had tried to put some restrictions on. They were like, they put capacity restrictions and like, I think like a curfew. And we were like, okay, that's the thing. And then 12 hours later, they were like, just kidding, everything's shutting down.
So tell me about your kind of the sort of real-time, I guess, reaction to that, both obviously personally, but for a restaurant that had just opened and you're being shut down, what was your sort of like your thought process in terms of what you could do and what the restaurant would do?
I mean, there wasn't a lot we could do. I forgot I started a little like Instagram Live series because everyone was doing Instagram Live then. Mm-hmm. It was the thing. I was like interviewing other, what did I call it, Som in the City, which I'm sure 9 other people also use the same title. But like I originally did it, I reached out to my general manager. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this thing. Do you want me to do it through Rochambeau? And he was like, no. And I was like, okay. And then I did it a couple times. I interviewed a couple other like somms or wine directors from around the city on like my own Instagram. And then he saw the response and was like, okay, you can do it through Rochambeau. But yeah, every week we interviewed other like wine professionals from around the city, and we partnered with a wine shop in South Boston, and we would tell people what we were going to drink in advance so that they could buy it if they wanted to and taste along and join the discussion. It was fun. But like that was the extent of like what we could do to keep people engaged, you know?
So as you're going through that year, and you mentioned kind of being on and off work, tell me about the decision to come to Oregon or the decision to make a big change. When you were looking for what you wanted to do, how did you start to narrow down the kind of jobs you were looking for and role you wanted to have?
Oh, even the question was way more analytical than the actual thought process was. Me deciding to move to Oregon was such a chaotic whim. It was me looking around and being like, this is not it. Mm-hmm. This is not the thing. It's not going to be the thing for a while. I need to go find somewhere where what I do makes sense. And it's not here. And it's not in New York, and it's not in Chicago, and it's not in San Francisco, and it's not in LA. You know, I need to go to the source. I kept saying I need to go to the source which sounds fair. I don't know. No, maybe I've just said it too many times, but now it sounds silly. But I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I was still at that point where, like, I had seen vines in books so many more times than in real life that they were still, like, stunning. Like, it's still, like, I don't know, I still have moments where, like, I'll be walking through the vineyard and I'll be like, damn, this is cool. You know? I think a lot of people get sort of numb to that. And I think that, you know, I do a little bit, but I still do have a few from time to time, like, wow, we really just got all these damn plants growing around that we make into this really cool thing that we ship around the world and people really enjoy and celebrate and love, and that's cool. But yeah, getting here was, I don't know. I knew I had to be somewhere else, and I had a very short list very quickly, and it narrowed down almost instantly. And I said, I guess I'm going to Oregon. I guess I should figure out anything about Oregon. You know, I knew about the wine industry of Oregon. I knew about Oregon wine, but I didn't know, like, I had never been here. I'd never been here before. It was an odd choice, but it worked out. It's worked out very well. But I could not have known that from where I jumped.
Tell me about your initial impressions of Oregon, the state, and Oregon, the industry, once you got here.
Oregon took me a little bit of getting used to. Portland's a smaller city than I'm used to. For all that, I mean, Boston's a small city as far as big city goes. Yeah, I always say Boston's a small big city and Portland's a big small city, right? Like, they're sort of like opposites of each other in a way. And there's quirks about Portland and Oregon that took getting used to. Things that are like Portlandia-esque, but like, you know, those sorts of things, but like I don't know. The one thing that's always sort of like irked me is like the love, like the obsession with local. And I love things that are local and crafted and done well. And this isn't always true, but I feel like I'll go to like markets in Portland and see people buy really, really ugly local art, or really, really bad local craft beer just because it's local. I agree that we should buy local, but I also think we should buy good, right? That's something about Oregon that threw me.
It's a very East Coast perception of Oregon.
Oh, I know. Like I said, we'll always be a Bostonian in Oregon.
You mentioned coming in to Oregon, the Lingua Franca, Domaine Serene were the places that you thought of as places you wanted to be. So let's talk about Domaine Serene first as the first place you landed. Tell me about impressions of there and of the work you started to do in Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, I think Domaine Serene has like a inarguable presence in the market. I think that they're just so well known, and they're certainly one of the not one of the founding families, but one of the families that sort of, I think, really elevated the status of Oregon in a big way. I think that they've also done a lot for Oregon Chardonnay in a really massive way. You know, Pinot Noir has always been the thing, but I think Oregon Chardonnay, particularly now, is taking off. And I think few people are making Chardonnay as well or in quantities that the Evanstads were in the late 90s. I mean, they still, when I was there, they were still releasing, early 2000s Chardonnays once in a while. They have a lot of club structures, so it was only accessible to certain people and whatever. But it's still a thing for them. And so that sort of like focus and attention is not something that not a lot of people have the capability of doing, but it's something that I think is a huge benefit to the region that they provide.
And tell me about working there.
Working there was, like I said, it was kind of like an opening again. So it was difficult, and it was a very, very structured system, which is not an environment that I super thrive in. But there are a lot of people that I worked. I mean, one of my best friends I met while I was there, and she's still there. She's been there for 4 or 5 years. A lot of people stay at Domain Stream for a long time because they provide a lot of opportunity and have a really strong culture.
So tell me about the move to here and initial role when you got to Lingua Franca.
Yeah, so I came over in the summer of 22. I started off running the wine club, which I think it's a super cool way to start out in managing a winery, because you get to know all of sort of like the most important buyers, the most essential people to the membership quickly. Right? You're their direct line, especially with a winery of this size. Like, if you run the Domain Serene Club, there's 10 people that are working on club at the same time, so you might not. Here it was just me, so I'm the direct line and it comes straight to me. And so I instantly knew the people who have been club members since day one, since we opened club, and and I think this is true of all wine clubs, but people who've been members for a while are not shy to tell you what they think of how you're running a program. But Larry and Thomas and the team gave me a lot of leeway to develop and change the program as I saw fit. And the program's changed and grown, and we've made it much more accessible to people in a lot of ways. The way the program exists now, there's no minimum to purchase. There's no necessary bottle count to buy in order to be a member. A lot of people came back with the feedback of we don't necessarily want X, Y, and Z and so we created a type of program that has that sort of flexibility, that you can buy exactly what you want in whatever quantity you want and still be part of the membership, still be part of the family. And it's been wildly successful.
You mentioned roles you've grown into since, so tell me about taking on additional responsibilities and what your kind of day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month looks like now.
Oh, I don't know. I just take it one step at a time. I'm getting interviewed today. That's happening.
Hope that goes well.
Me too. I've heard some things about the guy. It changes a lot. So now I am primarily responsible for the wholesale market and marketing opportunities, which is not what it's funny because the kids that go to college for marketing and things like that. I came to this job from a wine perspective, not from a marketing perspective. And so within the system of Constellation, I see the other wineries within our company, and most of their people are marketing people first, not wine people first. And I come to it from a different perspective. It's very odd because can feel like I'm missing a big component of my job, but then we have to go out and do events in the market, and then they don't know how, not that they don't know how to, but like they struggle to interact with guests and talk about the wine in a way that like just comes so fluidly to me, because that's my strength and where I came from. I think it's sort of a lesson that you can kind of learn from anything, but like, we all come to the table with our own strengths. And it's sort of a question of perspective of where you start from. But it's a learning curve, but something that I'm excited about and have had fun with. It's given me the opportunity to travel a lot, to some fun places, to some less fun places, but that's okay. Like Memphis needs some support and market too, and it's it's been a fun ride.
How is it different having a single brand of wine that you're selling versus being on the other side where you're interacting with a lot of different brands and selling a restaurant or that kind of thing instead?
Oh, it's so different. There's things about it that are great, and there's things about it that are certainly tricky. It does create a lot more focus. I'm very fortunate in that there have been a lot of times in my life that I've had to sell wine that I like, or is okay, or like serves a purpose in a certain place, so it needs to be on my list, or fits a price point, whatever it is. I'm very fortunate now to work with such a talented winemaking team and such a talented group of people at Lingua Franca that there's not a thing that we produce that I don't stand behind 100% and don't think is of the utmost quality, and that I wouldn't say with my whole chest, this is the epitome of what you should be drinking right now. It sounds so lame and so salesy, but it's the truth for me. It's really how I feel about Lingua Franca. I was a fan of Lingua Franca long before I worked here. I was buying Lingua Franca. I was recently talking to Larry. I was one of the only buyers in Massachusetts for Lingua Franca, because before Constellation, Lingua Franca wasn't distributed in very many states. It was just like California, Florida, New York, a little bit of Illinois, and like Massachusetts got a couple cases, and like me and Kat bought almost all of them. So, like I've been a fan of Lingua Franca for a very long time, long before I worked here, and I've always stood behind what Lingua Franca makes. And how can you not? I mean, Larry's a fucking giant, even though he's like 5'3". But like a giant in the sense that like he's been doing this for 45 years. He was an MS before anyone knew what an MS was, He worked alongside Charlie Trotter, and together they changed the face of what American fine dining looked like. He worked with the Coppolas at some of the most quintessential estates in the U.S. He took this parcel of land behind us that was a Christmas tree farm 20 years ago and made it one of the greatest winery estates in the U.S. That's ridiculous. He worked with Dominique Lafon. That dude has generations of winemaking in his blood. Generations. He doesn't have to be here, but he wanted to. And Thomas was like 25, 27, something like that. And he came over here having worked at Domaine de la Romanée-Conti and Domaine Dujac. That's bonkers. To work at one of those estates would be bonkers. But he worked at both and then was just like, I'm just going to stroll over to Oregon. The fact that those three people came together ever is an anomaly. But the fact that they came together and founded this place is a blessing.
Tell me about job challenges in 2025. What is it like selling, marketing wine right now, and what do you look ahead to? What does the future look like for the work you're doing?
I don't know, dude. Where do you want to start? How much more time do we have?
3 more batteries, so
okay.
keep rolling.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rough time. It's a rough time for a number of reasons. I think that, I mean, we can go in a number of directions with this. I think it's a rough time for wine sales for a few reasons. I think some of them are exaggerated. I think for a long time we blamed millennials and then we blamed Gen Z. And I think we're slowly seeing the numbers on that are not as true as, you know, the older generations that are really the ones that are starting to drink less want you to think. Sorry, gang. But I think people are pulling back on drinking a little bit. You know, I think the economy is in a rough state. I think it's hard to be out on the road now. I think, you know, as a gay man, there's certain states that I don't want to be in. You know, even like, you know, going to Texas, going to Tennessee made me really nervous. Like, I have really pretty nails, but I don't know if they're cool with that in Tennessee. They were.
They are very pretty.
Thank you so much. We had our 10-year anniversary party last Friday, and the theme was gold and black. So they're a little rough around the edges because they're like going on 2.5 weeks, but you know. But yeah, you know, politically it's difficult to be out there, and you know, I think that's something for me that's always been really important, to be very visible as a queer part of this community as well. I remember doing my certified exam and taking a little notepad and writing in, make sure to be the queer face that you didn't see in wine when you were coming up. I think it's something that we don't see a lot. We're lucky to have people like Remy in Willamette. You know, there's a few now, more than when I was 22. But there's a lot of political dissonance right now, man. There's a lot of opportunity to be not seen. So I think it's important to make sure that we are seen.
What comes next for you? What have you not done in wine that you want to do? What are you excited to try in the future? What's on your horizon?
You know, I've never made any kind of wine, and I think that's totally fine. I think that there's so many people that are like, you know, I think it's my turn to make wine, and I don't have to be that person. I think there's enough cooks in the kitchen. Just want to get that out there. No, I think that everyone should try their hands at things, but you know, not everyone has to be the winemaker. I don't, you know, when I was a young buck somm, I like had this very clear vision of like, I'm going to run programs, and then I'm going to open my own wine bar, and da-da-da-da-da. And since, you know, skipping to the other coast and sort of upending my life, it's been a really great progression, but not a progression I would have ever predicted. Even like a year ago, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly where I am now. And so I'm and like this isn't the lesson, kids. Like don't tell your boss that William said this, so it's okay, because like you should have a 5-year plan or whatever. But I so don't. I really enjoy exploring what comes on my plate and seeing what I drive with and what is successful for me and what I can grow into, and exploring multiple avenues at a time. So I don't know what's next. Like I said, I think that I have more growth to do in the position that I'm in now. I think that the people that are around me, I think I have growing to do of my team. I think I have some uplifting to do of the people around me still. And so I think that I don't necessarily need big changes at the moment, but I'm always open to whatever comes next.
What does the Oregon wine industry look like to you right now? You've been in it for a few years. You have an interesting perspective on it. What does the industry feel like, and where is it perhaps going over the next few years?
I think the Oregon wine industry right now is relatively hopeful, or at least I hope it is. Is it weird to say I hope it's hopeful? That sounds redundant or something. No, I think that there's lots of other parts of the wine world that are, if we look at ourselves in comparison, are in much worse shape, whereas wine in general is downtrending. I think we tend to downtrend a little bit less. I think so there is hope in Willamette more than in some other places. And I think we can all feel that. I think that there's a youth and a vibrancy to Willamette. I think just like walking around McMinnville, you feel that. I think just like, there's a sense of excitement here that you see in other places, but I don't know. There's a warmth to it. What do we see in the next? And what do we see in the future? I think it's time the white wines of Willamette get their flowers. I think it's time we really start appreciating Chardonnay in the Willamette Valley. I know we do in a lot of ways, but I think it's time that the world starts recognizing Willamette Valley Chardonnay. It has been a thing for so long. Well, I guess technically not that long, but, we move fast here. It's only been 50 years, and we're doing pretty good for ourselves. I think that, I travel around the country, a little bit internationally, and people always just go, oh, no, I'll do the Pinot. I'll skip the white. I have to beg people to drink our whites. And when they do, they love them. Okay.
Tell me about, as you look back this part in your career, you've had a lot of adventures, you've done a lot of interesting things. What are you proudest of, or what is your greatest accomplishment to this point?
What's my greatest accomplishment at this point? Softball. Being nominated for a James Beard Award was pretty cool. That was solid. I don't know if this is an accomplishment or... Particularly over the last year, I've had several people come to me who who used to work with me, whether at one of Barbara's restaurants or at Rochambeau, come to me and say, it's because of you I fell in love with wine. And some of them have since become sommeliers, and some of them have, since become bartenders or other, managers or restaurant professionals of some sort. And I don't know how much of like it's not an award. It's not, no one put me on a stage. But to me, it's a really big accomplishment that for that person, just my focus and time and attention that I put into teaching them and building fundamentals for them made a big change in their life and their career.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
It happened to me this weekend. I was in Boston. I was out on Cape Cod last weekend for a little time off, and I was swinging through, dropping samples off for a friend of mine that runs another restaurant, and I didn't know that the bartender was someone I used to work with, and he goes, "William," and I was like, "Yeah," and he just started gushing, and it was like, I haven't seen you in forever. I don't have your phone number, but it's you're the reason I fell in love with wine, and I think about you all the time, and you really gave us the fundament. You really gave us time and attention where no one else did that, and it's because of you that I know what I know, and I've been able to grow from that, and that was huge. Like, that made such a difference to me. I've had other people that have worked for me, come here and, be like, well, I'm a buyer now. Mm-hmm. And I want to sit in your tasting room, and then I'm going to go back and meet with our rep back home and put your winery's wine on my list.
All right. All the questions that I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover today that you wanted to cover?
I don't think so.
Thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your story with us, sharing this beautiful space with us, and making us all laugh a lot. We appreciate that very much. We'll let you off the hook. Thank you again.
Thank you.